Okay, so I'm not used to speaking loud, but I guess I have to if I want to be heard on the thing. Um, okay, so why am I making this video? Because I want to talk about what I'm working on, which is astrology, but not in the sense that most people understand. Most people think astrology is horoscope on the newspaper and hey, what's going to happen to you this weekend. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is studying the engineering, the science behind why has it been around for 6,000 years, it's still around, and yet some people say, well, there's no science behind it. And anytime you bring astrology up, you get shut down, so you can't bring any new element up and then be told again, but there's no science behind it. My job is precisely this, to bring the science behind it and to explain to people that look, you can study astronomy, and no offense to astronomers, but before you can calculate the orbit of a planet, you're going to have to learn algebra and calculus. And that's about this thick, to calculate the orbit of a planet. And my job is to try to figure out the engineering behind this in the simplest form so that even a 5-year-old can actually understand it, or maybe even a 10-year-old. I believe a 10-year-old can count up to 200, I think. That's feasible. And so based on that, let me do a quick overview. For example, we use 7 days in a week. There is 52 weeks in a year for 4 seasons, so that's 13 weeks times 4. What do we have? We have planets like the Earth that take 365 days to go around. We have planets much larger like Jupiter that take 12 years to go around. And on that 12, you can start even with this. Well, let me start even simpler than that. I'm an Aquarius. I'm ruled by Uranus according to ancient astrology. And Uranus is the 7th planet from the Sun. It's the 3rd in man, I'm bugging. 3rd in size and 4th in mass. So just with those numbers, okay, 3 plus 4 is 7, 3 times 4 is 12, and even 3 divided by 4 is the same as 9 divided by 12, which is a human pregnancy, by the way. So those numbers are not coincidental. So Uranus takes 84 years to orbit the Sun. That's 12 times 7, which is the same as writing 12 times 1 times 7, gives you 84. If you want to calculate in a simple way without all these books and square root and cubic roots, the orbit of Neptune, 12 times 2 times 7 is 168. The real orbit time is 165 years. And by the way, 1 plus 6 plus 5 is 12. And Neptune rules the 12th house of Pisces. That's not a hazard either. The difference between those two is 3. Now, the orbit time of Pluto is 12 times 3 times 7, 252. Its real orbit time is 248 years, leaving you with a difference of 4. You get back your 3 and 4 that you started with right here, or even right there. And that's how simple you can explain those things to kids so they can relate to, 84 years? Well, what happened 84 years ago? Well, 84 years ago, that was the rise of Hitler in the Social Party in Germany before the Second World War. And what happened then? The Kristallnacht, that night where they took over. Same thing that happened here at the Capitol, where they broke the glass at the Capitol. Now, if you look 84 years before Hitler, what do you find? You find the U.S. Civil War and the Joe Brown trial for the Harper's Ferry artillery taking and all that. He got hung for it. 84 years before that is the, the U.S. Revolutionary War. So there's definitely a cyclical correlation between this cycle of 84 years, which also, by the way, happens to be precisely a human lifespan. If you look on Google, the human average lifespan nowadays is between 82 and 86 years. I guess it was too hard to write 84, but that's it right there. Now, again, don't take Google as if it was the Gospel of John, because if you look for a Chinese zodiac wheel, you'll find them front with the years going 1935, 1936, 1937, and then you'll find one that's backward with the years going backward. The years never go backward. Even if you write in Arabic, numbers always go from left to right. So be careful of what can be misleading. Anyway, beyond this, my job is to find things like, okay, well, people say that the menstrual cycle of women goes with the moon. Is there more to it than just that? Well, let's search. The moon and the entrance of the moon within the Earth magnetosphere. Most of the time, the moon is outside of the Earth magnetosphere, but it does get in for 7 days every month, and that is the ovulation time. So now we have two things that correlate that time. Not just the breaking out, but also the creation of the nest. So boom. That 13 that I mentioned earlier, 13 weeks for 4 seasons, this is how I align the Greek wheel with the Chinese wheel. And it is possible to do so because Jupiter is really what determines the Chinese zodiac. 12 years, 1 year each. The only thing to take 12 years is Jupiter. And the Greek zodiac is determined by the sun. That was that zodiac changed when Julius Caesar went to Egypt, where they worshipped the sun god Ra, and he saw how much more harvest they had, and that's why he brought back the sun calendar that we use still with his name on it for Julius, July. Anyway, so when you align the two, what you find is this wheel is really the way that the wheel of Jupiter aligned, and Jupiter has a very as something that's peculiar to it. Unlike Earth, it doesn't have a North Pole and a South Pole. It has 5 vortexes up north and 8 south. When you look at this wheel, the way that it aligns, the 5th house is Leo, and the 8th house is the sheep. Again, like the same as your 5 vortex and 8, and that's 13. And across from that, you get that same 13 with Aquarius, the 11th house, aligning with the Ox, the 2nd house. And the interesting thing about that is Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus has 13 rings. So 13 rings and then 13 vortexes. And all that, 13 in 4 seasons gives you 52 weeks. That's the type of engineering I'm after. How do you simplify all this stuff that takes normally ages to get through so that kids can just understand, hey, you know what, 84 years is up. So some shit is gonna go down, I don't know what it is, but stay the fuck home. Boom, you know that, you're safe. You know, it doesn't take rocket science, doesn't take 60,000 years, it doesn't take looking at the other end of the sky with Hubble for whatever that is that they're searching to tell us where we're coming from, because the truth of the matter is, the Greek gave us the alphabet, astrology, and mathematics. And Hippocrates himself said, the father of medicine, no one should practice medicine without the knowledge of astrology. So to call it bullshit today, when everybody is pharmaceutically pushing whatever the fuck is on their agenda, excuse me, I don't function on profit, I function on what is real, what is true, and what actually proves to that can be cross-checks, you know? This is the position of Jupiter in 1939 in the house of Pisces. And my mother was a tiger, so yes, that does check. My best friend is a tiger. When I checked on her birth chart, Jupiter was in Pisces. So for me, that checked. You know, I checked for my father, same thing, and so on. But then there's something else you can check. That vortex thing, like I said, the 13 numbers. And there's a third way of checking. The zodiac, whether Greek or Chinese, is both yin, yang, yin, yang, yin, yang, yin, yang, meaning positive, negative, light, darkness, positive, negative, except for one sign, and that's the rat. Why? Because according to Chinese tradition, the rat has even numbers of digits in the front paws and 5 in the back, putting it odd, which matches the Capricorn with its 2 legs in the sand and 1 tail in the ocean. So there you have it. 3 ways of checking that your work is correct, and then trying to simplify everything so people can understand that beyond that, those house numbers also match letters. I'm not going to get into it right now because it could get too complicated, but in a quick, just one example, Napoleon was born with Jupiter in Cancer. That's why he married Josephine de Beauharnais, who was a Cancer. That's the 4th house, across from the 10th house. 10 and 4 is 14. The 14th letter of the alphabet is N, like Napoleon. I could go on for hours with this stuff, but we won't have time. Just one quick notation though. This 5 letter, this Leo, the 5th house, the 5th letter of the alphabet is E. It matches the 8th house, which is H. Leo is ruled by the sun. And what does the sun burn? Helium and hydrogen. So that's what astrology engineering is. If you have interest in that, I'm trying to write a book about it with QR codes. And for those who believe that astrology is not a reality, I tracked students and had their signs and seating arrangement, and I tracked the planetary arrangement each time. And each time, people moved according to where the magnitude of the planet were tugging them. So there's a real science and real engineering behind it. Anyone who says otherwise just doesn't know any better. Thank you very much for your time.